I didn't lose my dream overnight. I lost it quietly. Every time my own mother told me I was being selfish for wanting more. For most people, the word home feels safe. For me, it felt like a cage dressed up as love. Growing up, everyone said I was lucky. A supportive mom, a close family, a life that looked perfect from the outside. But behind closed doors, parental control ruled every decision I made. What I studied, who I spoke to, what I was allowed to dream about. My mother never raised her voice. She didn't have to. She was smarter than that. She used guilt instead. Every time I talked about my dreams, real dreams, the kind that made my chest feel tight with hope, she smiled softly and reminded me of reality, bills, stability, sacrifice. She said she was protecting me. She said she knew better. She said I'd thank her one day. And for a long time, I believed her. This is a family drama that didn't start with shouting or slammed doors. It started with a love that slowly turned into control, with expectations that crushed ambition, with a dream versus expectations battle I didn't even realize I was losing. I wanted a life that felt like mine. She wanted a life that looked safe to her. And somewhere in between, trust began to rot. People think betrayal always comes from enemies. They're wrong. The deepest betrayal story often comes from the person who knows exactly how to hurt you without leaving a mark. By the time I noticed something was wrong, my confidence was already gone. My choices didn't feel like choices anymore. They felt pre-approved. When I questioned her, she laughed gently. When I pushed back, she cried. When I stood firm, she reminded me of everything she'd done for me. That's how parental control works when it's wrapped in affection. You don't see the bars. You just feel smaller every day. I told myself this was normal, that every family has expectations, that dreams are a luxury for other people. But then came the moment that changed everything. A moment so quiet, so calculated, that it took me days to understand what she'd really done. That was when I realized this wasn't love. It was fear, hers, passed down to me. And the most painful part? She truly believed she was right. This isn't a story about rebellion. It's not about screaming matches or running away in the night. It's about slow realization, about silence becoming strength, about choosing myself without becoming cruel. Because when a parent tries to stop you from following your dreams, the damage doesn't explode. It sinks in, it spreads, and once you finally see it, you can never unsee it. I grew up believing my life had already been planned before I was old enough to question it. My mother liked to say we were best friends. She knew my schedule, my passwords, my fears. And for years, I mistook that closeness for love. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. No screaming neighbors, no visible chaos. Just routines, rules, and expectations passed down like family heirlooms. From the outside, our family looked stable. Inside, everything revolved around parental control, even when it was disguised as concern. My mom had a way of making her expectations sound reasonable. She never said, "You can't do that." She said, "I just worry about you." When I talked about becoming something creative, something risky, her face tightened for half a second before the smile returned. She'd ask questions that felt supportive at first. How would you pay rent? What if you fail? Don't you want a normal life? That was the beginning of my dream versus expectations war, even though I didn't have the language for it yet. I was the oldest daughter, the responsible one, the example. Every achievement was celebrated if it fit her vision. Every detour was treated like a phase I'd grow out of. College was her choice, my major was her compromise, my future hers to manage. Whenever I hesitated, she reminded me of everything she'd sacrificed, her youth, her chances, her dreams. "I just don't want you to struggle like I did," she'd say, her voice heavy with emotion, and I felt selfish for wanting more. That's the quiet cruelty of this kind of family drama. No villains, no obvious abuse, just slow erosion. I learned to doubt myself before I even tried. I learned that approval was conditional. I learned that disappointing her felt worse than disappointing myself. Friends noticed before I did. They'd ask why I always needed to check with my mom, why I sounded unsure about things I clearly wanted, why my goals kept shrinking. I laughed it off. I just cares, I said. But deep down, I felt it, that constant pressure to be grateful instead of free. My mother didn't see herself as controlling. She saw herself as steering me away from disaster, and I let her. Because standing up to her meant risking the one thing I depended on most, her love. Looking back now, I understand how easily a betrayal story can begin without betrayal ever being spoken out loud. It starts when trust replaces choice, when guidance becomes authority, when love comes with strings. At the time, though, I still believed we were on the same side. I didn't know she had already crossed a line. I didn't know decisions were being made without me. I didn't know my future was quietly being redirected. All I knew was that something felt uneasy, and that uneasy feeling was the warning I ignored. The first sign something was wrong didn't feel dramatic. It felt confusing. I started noticing small things, emails I didn't remember deleting, phone calls that ended the moment I walked into the room, decisions already made before I'd even been asked. When I questioned my mom, she looked genuinely surprised. "Didn't we talk about this?" she asked, calm and certain. I searched my memory. Nothing. That's how the gaslighting began. Not loud, not obvious, just enough to make me doubt myself. This is how parental control tightens, by rewriting reality while smiling. I had been preparing to apply for a program I cared about deeply. It wasn't reckless, it wasn't unrealistic, it was simply mine. One afternoon, I logged into my email and saw the rejection. My heart dropped. I hadn't even submitted the application yet. When I confronted her, she sighed like I was exhausting her. "I sent an inquiry weeks ago," she said. "They told me you weren't a good fit. I didn't want to upset you." She said it like it was kindness. That moment cracked something open inside me. This wasn't guidance anymore. This was a betrayal unfolding in slow motion. I told her she'd crossed a line. She didn't yell, she cried. She talked about fear, about safety, about how she only wanted to protect me from disappointment. And suddenly, I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the one hurting her mother. That's the genius of manipulation in family drama. You end up apologizing for being wronged. After that, everything escalated quietly. She started contacting people on my behalf, advisors, relatives, even friends' parents. They'd call me with concerns. They'd repeat her worries using different voices. I felt surrounded. Every path I tried to take narrowed until only one remained, the one she approved. This wasn't just dream versus expectations anymore. It was control versus identity. I stopped sharing ideas with her. She noticed immediately. "Why are you shutting me out?" she asked, wounded. "Because every dream I shared with you disappeared," I wanted to say, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded. I smiled. I played along. On the outside, I looked obedient. On the inside, something hardened. That's when I understood the truth about this family drama. She didn't trust me to live my own life. And worse, she didn't believe I could succeed without her steering every move. The betrayal wasn't one big act, it was a pattern. Small controls layered on top of each other, each one reasonable on its own, together suffocating. And the most dangerous part? She truly believed she was right. By then, I wasn't angry anymore. I was alert. Because when manipulation stops hiding, you don't fight it head on. You observe, you wait, and I was about to reach the moment that would force me to choose between keeping the peace or finally telling the truth. The breaking point didn't arrive with a fight, it arrived with a document. I found it by accident while looking for a receipt on our shared computer, a folder with my name on it, carefully labeled, password protected. That alone made my stomach drop. I didn't know the password, but she did, and she had never told me the folder existed. Inside were emails, forms, and saved drafts, every major decision about my future, neatly organized, applications I never sent, programs I'd talked about in passing, notes summarizing why this path isn't suitable. It was a blueprint of my life, written without me. That was the moment the family drama stopped being emotional and became undeniable. This wasn't overprotection. This was control. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen, feeling something hollow out inside my chest. The realization hit slowly, like cold water seeping in. She hadn't just influenced my choices, she had replaced them. Every time I'd hesitated, every opportunity that quietly vanished, every door that never opened, it all led back to this. The full weight of parental control finally landed. When I confronted her, my voice didn't shake. That scared her. She asked why I'd been snooping. She said she was only organizing things to help. She said I wasn't ready to make these decisions on my own. I asked her one question. Did you ever plan to tell me? She didn't answer. That silence was louder than any argument. In that moment, the dream versus expectations battle ended. There was no misunderstanding left to resolve, no middle ground. This was a betrayal story where love had crossed into ownership. I went to my room and closed the door. For the first time, she didn't follow. I sat on the floor, back against the bed, and cried until my head hurt. Not because of the lost opportunities, but because I finally understood something terrifying. She didn't see me as a separate person. She saw me as an extension of herself, a second chance at a life she never lived. That realization broke me, and then it did something else. It made me quiet. People expect explosions at moments like this, screaming, threats, ultimatums. But the truth is, silence is what comes when you stop hoping someone will change. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I stopped asking for permission. She mistook my calm for surrender. That was her mistake. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was the point where it shifted, where grief turned into clarity, where fear turned into planning, and while she believed she'd won, I was already stepping out of the role she'd written for me. I didn't confront her again. I didn't threaten to leave. I didn't demand an apology. That's the part people misunderstand. Real revenge doesn't announce itself. It waits. I learned to play the role she expected, the agreeable daughter, the cautious one, the girl who finally understood. I nodded when she talked. I thanked her for advice I never planned to follow. From the outside, it looked like parental control had won. Inside, I was building something she couldn't touch. I stopped sharing dreams, not because I'd given them up, but because I'd learned how dangerous honesty could be. Instead, I shared decoys, safe plans, predictable goals that fit her idea of success. She relaxed. That was the first crack in her certainty. While she believed she was steering my future, I quietly reclaimed it. New email, new passwords, documents stored where she couldn't reach. Every small step felt terrifying and empowering at the same time. This was still a family drama, but now I understood the rules. Power didn't come from confrontation, it came from independence. I researched programs again, this time in private. I talked to mentors she didn't know. I asked questions without filtering them through her fear. The dream versus expectations conflict hadn't disappeared. It had shifted. Her expectations no longer defined my limits. I didn't rush, I didn't make emotional decisions. Because when someone has controlled your life for years, the most dangerous move is sudden freedom. You have to build stability first. And slowly, I did. Money saved quietly. Opportunities explored silently. Confidence rebuilt in spaces where her voice couldn't reach me. She sensed the change, but couldn't name it. "You seem different," she said one evening. "Calm, observant." "I'm just growing up," I replied. That unsettled her. Control depends on access, and access was what I was slowly removing. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't punishment. This was self-preservation. In every betrayal story, there's a moment when the victim stops trying to be understood by the person who hurt them. That was my moment. I stopped needing her approval, and without that leverage, her influence weakened. She still gave advice, still warned me about risks, still framed fear as love, but it no longer landed the same way, because for the first time, I had a private truth. I didn't need her permission to exist. And the irony? The more independent I became, the more anxious she grew. She started double-checking things, asking questions, trying to reinsert herself into decisions I no longer discussed. That's when I realized something crucial. She wasn't afraid of me failing. She was afraid of becoming irrelevant. And that fear was about to catch up with her. Karma didn't show up as punishment. It showed up as exposure. Once I stopped depending on her, the cracks in her control became visible to everyone else. The first shift happened quietly. Relatives who used to repeat her concerns started asking me questions instead. Mentors began contacting me directly, not through her. Doors she once guarded no longer needed her key. She noticed. Her advice grew sharper. Her tone changed. The calm certainty she once carried started slipping. That's the thing about parental control. It only works when the person being controlled believes they need it. I didn't argue with her when she warned me I was making mistakes. I didn't defend myself when she implied I was being influenced by the wrong people. I just kept moving. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was the natural consequence of autonomy. And that's why it worked. She began contradicting herself, telling others she trusted my judgment, then privately insisting I was lost, trying to maintain an image of support while tightening her grip behind the scenes. People noticed the inconsistency. In every long-running family drama, truth doesn't explode, it leaks. The turning point came at a family gathering. Someone congratulated me on an opportunity she'd once dismissed as unrealistic. I thanked them, simply, calmly. My mother froze. She tried to correct the story, tried to frame it as her idea, but the details didn't match. For the first time, she didn't control the narrative. That moment landed harder than any confrontation could have, because it wasn't me exposing her, it was reality doing it on my behalf. This is where the dream versus expectations conflict finally flipped. My dreams weren't theoretical anymore, they were happening, and her expectations, they were being left behind. The betrayal story she'd never acknowledged started revealing itself through her reactions, defensiveness, jealousy, quiet resentment. She wasn't angry because I'd failed, she was angry because I'd succeeded without her guidance. Karma isn't loud, it's precise. She lost influence not through punishment, but through irrelevance. The same control she once relied on became the thing that isolated her. When people asked why she seemed distant, she blamed stress, change, life. But I knew the truth. Control feels like love until it stops working, and when it does, the person who relied on it has nothing left to stand on. I didn't celebrate her discomfort. I didn't need to, because the power dynamic had already shifted. She couldn't stop me anymore, not because I fought her, but because I outgrew her reach. After everything shifted, I expected to feel triumphant, relieved, vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. Winning a silent war doesn't come with applause, it comes with distance. My mother and I still spoke, still shared meals, still played our roles, but something fundamental had changed. She no longer planned my future, and I no longer invited her into it. That space between us felt uncomfortable at first, like walking without a familiar weight on my shoulders. This is the part of the family drama no one talks about, the grief that follows freedom. I mourned the version of her I wished she'd been, a mother who could separate love from control, support from ownership. I also mourned myself, the years I spent shrinking my dreams to fit someone else's fear. The dream versus expectations battle didn't end with her losing. It ended with me learning how deeply it had shaped my identity. I had to relearn trust in myself, in my decisions. For a long time, every choice felt risky, even the small ones. Control leaves a residue. It teaches you to second-guess joy. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was slow and often lonely. I learned to set boundaries without explaining them, to say less instead of more, to let silence do the work that arguments never could. My mother struggled with that. She tried to reconnect through advice, through concern, through guilt. But I didn't engage. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. In every betrayal story, there's a moment when forgiveness becomes possible, not because the other person deserves it, but because holding on to pain no longer serves you. I forgave her quietly, without an apology, without a conversation. That forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. I understood something important then. She didn't try to stop my dreams because she hated them. She tried to stop them because she was afraid. Fear passed down through generations, disguised as protection, enforced through parental control. Understanding that didn't excuse her behavior, but it freed me from carrying it forward. I chose not to repeat the pattern. I chose to live a life where guidance doesn't erase autonomy, where love doesn't demand compliance. The betrayal story didn't turn me bitter. It made me intentional. And if there's one lesson I carry now, it's this. You don't have to become cruel to reclaim yourself. You don't have to destroy relationships to protect your dreams. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly step into your own life. I live differently now, not louder, not dramatically, just honestly. I make decisions without rehearsing explanations in my head. I pursue goals without shrinking them first. I trust my instincts, even when they scare me. That didn't happen overnight. It came from surviving a family drama where love and control were tangled so tightly I couldn't tell them apart for years. Sometimes my mother still looks at me like she's trying to recognize who I've become. Sometimes I see regret in her eyes. Other times, I see relief. We never had a big conversation about what happened. No confessions, no closure scene. And that used to bother me. But I've learned something important since then. Closure doesn't always come from other people. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself anyway. The dream versus expectations conflict didn't destroy my family. It forced me to redefine my place in it. I stopped being the project, the second chance, the extension of someone else's fear. I became a person. And that's what makes stories like this so difficult to talk about, because parental control doesn't look abusive on the surface. It looks responsible. It looks loving. It looks like sacrifice. Until you realize your dreams are the price. This betrayal story didn't end with revenge or punishment. It ended with distance, boundaries, and quiet freedom. And maybe that's why it stays with people, because so many of us grow up believing we owe our lives to the people who raised us, that gratitude means obedience, that love means compliance. But love shouldn't require you to disappear. If you're listening to this and feeling that tightness in your chest, that sense of being guided too tightly, protected too much, steered away from what makes you feel alive, you're not ungrateful, you're not selfish, you're waking up. This kind of family drama doesn't always have villains. Sometimes it just has people who never learned how to let go. and learning to let go of guilt, of fear, of expectations that were never yours might be the hardest dream you'll ever have to follow. So I'll leave you with this. If the person who loves you most is also the one standing between you and your future, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you leave? Or would you do what I did and quietly choose yourself? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.